I realized that a lot of times people with dementia existed, they didn't live. And by that I mean we kept them clean, we keep them fed, we keep them changed, and if they're not in an activity, they're not going to self-initiate any activity. So I developed a program that I named Namaste.
Good morning, Min. Lovely to see you. Thank you for spending some time with me today. So, as you know, Suzanne Mumford at Care UK has been doing some amazing work there, and we're delighted to hear how Namaste has spread across Care UK and is now being practiced in, I think, 80% and more Care UK homes all over the UK, which is so thrilling and exciting for us, and Suzanne's played a big role in that. So today
I'm especially pleased. I'm especially pleased because I was part of the planning to roll it out and part of the train the trainers teaching before COVID. So they've done amazingly well to keep it, up and running through that. I'm delighted to know that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you had a core of some of the engine room of Care UK, in your training sessions, didn't you? And I think from that core, they've managed to pass on that knowledge and information and actually get going with Namaste, which is great, isn't it?
It's hard to get going, but it's also infectious, isn't it? Once you've seen it successful, you want to see it again. I hope that's the way it's worked for all of you at Care UK.
So, Min, just for those of you that don't know you, and could you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you started, how you came into this, and maybe how Namaste first touched you?
I was working, my background is that I'm a nurse, a palliative care nurse, and I worked for a long time at St Christopher's Hospice in South London.
Stop there, because my phone just went off very conveniently. Let me ask you that again. Sorry.
Okay. Go.
So, Min, for those of you that don't know you and haven't met you yet, could you just give us a little bit of background about yourself and how Namaste came into your life as well?
Yes. I was working as a palliative care nurse at St Christopher's Hospice, and I had a particular interest in the palliative care of people with dementia and their families. And I was interested as well because my own family were affected. My aunt and then later both my parents had dementia. And so I came at it from every angle, really. And I was quite puzzled as to how best to care for people with dementia at the end of their lives. I learned how to do a better job of assessing their pain and symptoms and planning end-of-life care so that they could die at home and die peacefully. But I was left with what is quality of life for these people. Joyce always talks about people who are existing and not living. And that was Cicely Saunders' concern too. We will help you not only to die peacefully, but to live until you die. And it wasn't clear to me at all how I was, as a palliative care nurse, how I was to help people who couldn't talk to me, didn't recognize their family, couldn't feed themselves, couldn't do anything necessary for themselves. And so I was absolutely thrilled when I read Joyce's book. I was told about Joyce first, and then I read the book about Namaste Care, and it seemed so obvious to me. I couldn't understand why it had taken an American to come and tell us that sensory communication was the option, and that the options of comfort and pleasure were always there, and that people with advanced dementia, even in the later stages of dementia, have all these emotional connections, are able to make eye contact, want to communicate. And Namaste just kind of showed me a way to make that part of everyday care in care homes and also, you know, at home. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's funny how things come full circle. And my introduction to Namaste was meeting you, Min, when you came to look after some of my residents, and you were coming from, you know, from St. Christopher's in that capacity to help us with palliative care. And I think you had a chat with my dad initially, didn't you? And that's how,
right. Yeah.
That's how you know, we got started. And then I heard about Joyce, and you introduced me to Joyce. I came and spent, you know, a couple of days with you at St. Christopher's, and it just transformed, you know, our whole outlook. And at the same time, I say transformed, but it sort of reminded us as well of that original outlook that we had when we started in that first care home that I grew up in. So in terms of Joyce and her journey, just give us a little summary for those people that Namaste hasn't reached yet. How did Joyce come up with Namaste? How did it start?
I guess,
and how did it go from there?
I guess I was just thinking just now about when you were saying about it taking you back to your roots, that actually, to some extent, Joyce has taken, you know, care back to its roots. I think she came over in the 80s as a student social worker, and she did study palliative care over here and also over in the States, but it was just a part of her teaching, her training as a social worker. And she worked for most of her professional life in what we would call activities. She found that the people she was looking after, she couldn't talk to them about their depression, but she could help them not to be depressed by giving them, you know, things to do. And she started the club, which was for people with moderate dementia, really mild to moderate cognitive impairment, doing all sorts of things, you know, word games, quizzes, gardening, cooking, you know, all of those activities that we've actually got really good at, I think, over the last 20 years. And she had, you know, volunteer activities for people who got up early, and film clubs for people who went to bed late. And, you know, it was all very successful. But she found that just when she was planning to retire at about 60, the whole demographic of dementia was changing, really, and the people coming into the care homes were in a much further advanced state, and particularly the people who had been in the club. These people were you know, no longer able to do the sing along or because they needed really one-to-one support. And the care homes didn't want to take them out of the club because it had been their whole source of quality of life, really, but they didn't know what to do with them. And Joyce found herself in a care home just observing, and she observed that people with, you know, in the later stages of dementia were particularly responsive to loving touch and to music, and really to every kind of sensory intervention. And she came up with Namaste, which is, you know, a multi-dimensional program, and that's how it came about.
And also, you know, from the families coming to visit, obviously, with families coming to visit people that have, you know, a level of independence, and you know, there's some great interactions that they can have during visits. But for those people that maybe are non-verbal, maybe they have, you know, other challenges, what can families do? How can they connect? Sometimes, you know, a lot of the time they can be lost, and that even happens today, right now in the UK, right?
It happens very, very much, because I think people simply don't know how to connect with somebody who's not able to talk to them, who doesn't necessarily recognize who they are. I mean, it's a very hurtful moment, I think, when your mother or father, your partner, your wife, your husband, or whoever, doesn't actually even know you, or doesn't recognize your face, which is maybe different. And I think the common experience is that people's visits become much shorter. And some people decide not to visit at all because they want to remember somebody as they were before. And I think that, you know, it's a very complex business, and it leaves people feeling, you know, lost and guilty as well. And I think Namaste does provide for people who will engage with it. It provides them with a different way to connect. And I think we saw in the study that we did, we saw, you know, I mean, actually on the very first day, we saw a mother and daughter. The daughter was giving a hand massage, and the mother massaged her hand back, and she just said, you know, my mother has done nothing as a mother since she came here, which was about 5 years before. So it creates, and they were very, very close, but it created another closeness. And I remember a husband saying, you know, that actually brushing his wife's hair, he hadn't done that since she'd gone into the care home, and it brought them much closer again. We're not a touchy-feely culture, and Namaste gives permission to be in touch, you know, and I think there are quite a few people who think, oh, I don't want all that touchy-feely stuff. Yeah. And of course, if people don't want to be touched, if they don't want to have their hand held, if they don't want massage, then that's always easy to spot. Actually, you can always see when somebody doesn't consent to touch, and you should never force it on anyone. But in my experience, as dementia progresses, and you know, people who are a bit stiff upper lip often go back into being much more dependent, really, on touch. We all need human touch. I mean, it's kind of, you know, I think it's a well-known fact. You know, children that are not touched are fail to thrive, and it's the same through our lives. I think we just manage touch when we're adults, in whatever way we choose. But I think when people have advanced dementia, that's another need that they can't meet for themselves.
And CQC and local authorities that come and regulate and inspect the services across the UK and the quality, I mean, they're often looking for ways that we can evidence person-led or person-centered care. Also ways that we can involve the connected parties in that care. How does everyone contribute? You know, if somebody is non-verbal, the family are going to play a key role in giving us information about that person and their background. And what ways can Namaste be used to really make something very individual and involve the families as well? You know, how can we get that happening?
Well, I think that Namaste Care should always, for every resident, should begin with a discussion with the family, actually. I mean, I think if you're going to change somebody's care, you're going to change their care plan, it needs to be shared with family. So I think those family meetings are incredibly important. And you know, they're about honouring the spirit within. You know, that's what Namaste is about. And how can we honour the spirit in your, you know, the person that you love, you know, your husband or your father or your brother, whoever it is. You know, what did he used to sing in the shed? You know, what did he wear an aftershave when he was younger? You know, what do you associate with your dad when you were a child? All of these different things, you know, going sort of beyond life history. What school did you go to? But to the things that, you know, like what soap did you use at home? That kind of thing. To really find a sensory biography as well as a life story. Or obviously the life story is still incredibly important. That's where you can, you know, pull on things like the daughter who brought in a basin full of wood shavings for her dad, who was a carpenter. And he could, you know, all he could do really was to just run his hands through them. But, you know, the scent of that wood was part of his life. So good dementia care, you know, comes through life story, and that can only really come from the family. And they will know things that people don't like. I mean, I have to hold up my hand and say, my mum really hated lavender because her mum used to wash out the sick bowl with lavender water. So she always associated it with being ill and sick. So, you know, that was no good to her. And so you're looking for, and when we were doing doll therapy, I remember a family saying, my mum had 7 miscarriages. I don't think that's for her. And I'm absolutely sure she was right. So it's about involving the family in your initial exploration to see how to achieve well-being, but to involve the family in being part of that, like the daughter who brought in the bowl of wood chippings, or, you know, my favorite story from way back was a son who rushed out and bought Chanel number 5 because that's what he remembered his mum wearing. Wow. You know, it's just, you know, and these are things that people can do, and they feel a sense of agency. They feel that they're actively involved in the care of the person that they love, which often they lose when they come into care and other people do all their personal care, you know, have to look after them.
And a Namaste session can be really exciting when you've got carers, you know, they're providing Namaste in some capacity, and then you've got family members as well. So it's a really nice way to bring a sense of community, even though, you know, we're focusing on that individual.
Absolutely. And those, I mean, I think people need to be, you know, people are very creative in their Namaste, you know, and often, you know, a nice way of doing that is when you have a themed Namaste session, you know, like, you know, the obvious ones are things like the seaside, you know, when you have shells and sand and, you know, the music is, you know, like to be on the prom and, you know, like to be beside the seaside, and, or, you know, but actually you can also find, you know, different things from different eras, different things that people know and love, maybe seabirds, maybe boats, maybe, you know, whatever it is. And I particularly, actually, I like, you know, give a plug for Nicola Kendall's book. You know, I like both her books. You know, they're very excellent and readable addition to Joyce's, you know, also wonderfully readable book. But the activities book, you know, there's a whole section on, you know, days. You know, if you just run out of ideas, and there's no reason to think you will, because actually this is just about, you know, what would I like to do today, and doing it in your Namaste session. It's a chance to you know, just do what you like. And I'm always keen that people should choose the music that they like, because you're going to be in there for 2 hours. You don't want to be listening to something you're not going to enjoy. But Nicola's book has, you know, there's a session on the rainy day, the, you know, spring, autumn, a rose garden. You know, there's just endless, and it's impossible not to just work out what she's doing and invent yourself some more themes. I really like that approach. Yeah.
Fantastic. And then when you put all these pieces together, and you have a consistency of approach, you're giving Namaste the importance that it needs. Nothing will override Namaste, because that's our session. We're not going to have interruptions, distractions during that session. We're really going to focus on that, and everyone from the maintenance man to the managers giving that Namaste the importance it deserves. Then we can find the impact of that on the culture of the home as well. Not just that session of Namaste, that the whole approach of the home can change.
Oh, I do think so, because I think once people have been in the Namaste room and felt the calmness that is usually to be found there, and seen people who are sometimes agitated calmed, and seen people who are withdrawn in their dementia, who are overstimulated and just shut off, seeing them coming out and making eye contact or smiling, or maybe using words when they haven't been doing so very often, and finding perhaps that they remember a daughter's name, or you know, people are not getting better, but they can be their best selves in Namaste. And then I think that atmosphere begins to flow under the door, because, you know, your residents are maybe calmer, but I think it also affects staff, and that people are calmer. And once you've seen somebody smile, you really want them to do it again. It's just a human response, isn't it? And so, you know, that concept really of working to find ways to give people a sense of well-being. And these things are always shared, aren't they? You know, when you give a hand massage, it's not just the person who receives the hand massage who enjoys it. The person giving it also enjoys it. You know, Namaste is a very rewarding activity. And I think I was hearing from somebody the other day who have started to do Namaste, and the care worker who was doing it, she does it just once a week for you know, the Namaste is actually, you know, 5 days a week, and this worker does it once a week. But she said it's the most tiring day I have, but it's the one I enjoy most. And you know, I think that's kind of what you would expect, I think, because people are putting so much in and they get so much out.
Yeah.
Yeah.